In March, the legislature passed a law instructing the Office of the Legislative Auditor to investigate the cost overruns and delays in the Southwest Light Rail Transit Project, a 14.5-mile light rail track that will connect downtown Minneapolis with the communities of Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and St. Louis Park. Last week, the Legislative Audit Commission met for a presentation of the special review report.
But we decided to launch a special review to try to get some information out to members and to the public as quickly as possible. You may remember that the law that directed us to do this work listed nearly 20 different questions or concerns that the legislature wanted answered. And so what we did with the special review, it's a little bit of a different report for us. Usually our reports, as you know, have findings and recommendations. This report doesn't have that. Instead, what we decided to do is from that list of 20 questions, we decided to pick off the ones we could answer as quick as possible, because we thought it was really important to get information out as fast as possible.
I don't begrudge the city of St. Louis Park. They were listening to their, constituents. They didn't want freight rail there, and so they advocated. And the Twin City and Western Railroad advocated for their economic self-interest, which was to route this in Kenilworth. But it appears to me, Mr. Chair and others on the Audit Commission, that this was really a political decision and not a technical one.
I'm very concerned about the damage that has occurred to the condominiums in the Kenilworth area. Now, Representative Hornstein, myself, and Senator Dibble, we have visited those condominiums, and what we saw is really very, very troubling. And I think that these folks, their homes are large measure, like everybody else, probably their largest major asset in their portfolio is their home. And the value to their homes has decreased, drastically.
There continues to be risk in this project, and certainly just the construction of the Kenilworth Tunnel is the one that has caused the delays and much of the budget disruption. But I think we're hopeful we'll be able to stick on that schedule that we've outlined before.
It is well known that I dispute the argument that any of this was unexpected. To the extent that anything was unexpected, it's because it wasn't examined and studied as closely as it should have been. But so much goes back to the planning phase of this project and the environmental and other analyses and study.
Joining me to provide his perspective on the first report issued by the Legislative Auditor is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Scott Newman. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
According to the Legislative Auditor, Judy Randall, this first report is intended to be a kind of background chapter to bring everyone up to speed, as well as an overview of what led to the overruns and delays. There will be more reports coming. Did you learn anything at this point that you didn't already know?
Well, the thing that surprised me the most is the cost overrun, which I thought was at $500 million, came in at about $550 million. So there's $50 million more in cost overrun than what I had anticipated. But for the most part, what the OLA's report did was confirm in facts, in terms of an investigation or an audit, what we suspected.
One item that I found striking is that nearly $1 billion in funding for the project came from the federal government. The next $1 billion was a combination of funding from Hennepin County and the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority. There are a few other funding sources, including the state of Minnesota, at $30 million. What is the legislature's role in this project when the state's actual contribution is such a small percentage of the overall cost?
Irrespective of the amount of money that the state has put in to date, I would say that the state's future role in this fiasco is zero. We have tried mightily to provide an off-ramp to get the state of Minnesota out of this guideway light rail scenario. And to date, we've done a pretty good job. We're only in for 30 million compared to an anticipated 2.7 billion. And a few years ago, we passed in the Transportation Committee, we repealed the state's obligation to provide for 50% of the maintenance and operating cost of Southwest Light Rail. So the state of Minnesota is right now positioned in a good place to not have to contribute future money to this. But make no mistake about it, I anticipate that the Met Council and Hennepin County are going to come to the state of Minnesota and ask them to bail them out of this. And if the legislature does that, I just cannot imagine a worse decision, because you have to remember now, we have got 14.5 miles of light rail that is currently anticipated to be a $2.75 billion project, and that is a guesstimate, an estimate. The Met Council does not know how long it's going to take them to finish this, and they do not know how much money it is going to take to finish it. And I can tell you that in this cost overrun, there are some significant sums that are not included in the OLA report. So it's worse than what the OLA has said.
I'd like to hone in a little bit more on the federal government's contribution to this. As I said, it's about $1 billion from the feds, which is going to be, assuming the total cost estimate is accurate, about 35% of the total cost. But it begs a different question. Is the federal government incentivizing something that perhaps would not have been built? Or, in other words, is federal money unduly influencing the choices that are made?
Unfortunately, the answer to that question is yes. It absolutely does, and it's not just this program. It happens all the time. See, what happens is the federal government will pony up a small amount of money, and the legislature and the executive branch, they can't resist it. It's free money. We can't turn that money down. We have to take it. The problem is the state match. And in many, many programs, the state match runs from between 20 and 50%. We got a little lucky on Southwest Light Rail. Would Southwest Light Rail have ever gotten off the ground without the federal $1 billion? I don't think so. And it's a terrible mistake on the part of the Federal Department of Transportation to be doing this. And there are many other examples that I could give you that we don't have time right now, but the answer is absolutely.
I would encourage those who are interested to go online and read the OLA special review. There's a lot of detail about the changes that have needed to be made as the project went on, the reasons for the delays and the cost overruns. This is a very, very large infrastructure project. I wonder though, some of these questions were unresolved at the time the project began. And so is there a tension between getting a project off the ground, knowing that there will be questions later that could cost more, versus waiting until all your ducks are in a row and then doing the project? Is there a tension in there?
Shannon, this is the largest infrastructure project in the history of the state of Minnesota. Cost more money than any other project we've ever had. Is there tension? Oh yeah. There are people that wanted this project so badly they would do just about anything to get it going. And in my mind, it's literally criminally negligent to have proceeded the way they have proceeded. And this is the Met Council, and this is Hennepin County Commissioners, to have proceeded the way they have because they didn't even know what the route was before they started this project, which was one of the major cost overruns and delays. How can you possibly plan something of this magnitude, of this cost, and not have all your ducks in a row? Mismanagement at the extreme, in my estimation.
According to Charlie Zelli, who is the chair of the Metropolitan Council, the project is now 62% complete. And he said that it is worth it to finish the project because of the benefits that it will ultimately provide. The expected completion date is now 2027. Certainly it will be important to learn some lessons from this project. What are your takeaways?
Remember that the expected completion date of 2027 is a guess on the part of the Met Council. There is nothing set in stone, nor is the final estimate of the cost. Chairman Zelli and I have had numerous conversations on this, and I strongly disagree with him. I think that he is trying to put a very pleasant face on this, and he will talk in terms of how this is absolutely necessary to get done. We're too deep in to stop. And frankly, I've told him, I think what you ought to do is stop and make this the most expensive bike path in the nation, because all you're doing is throwing good money after bad at this point. So Chairman Zelli and I do not agree on this. And the takeaway is that we have got to have some kind of oversight, better management of these kinds of programs. Number one, have the plan in place so you know what you're dealing with before you start, because that's not what the Met Council did. They started before they were ready. We should have external audits, not internal audits, to watch the money. And then we should have some way of the legislature supervising or watching how they are spending the taxpayers' money. None of those things have happened in the Southwest Light Rail project.
Finally, on a related note, the Senate's unscientific State Fair opinion poll posed this question to fairgoers. Should members of the Metropolitan Council be elected to office rather than appointed by the governor? This has been a question that's been thrown about for a while. Among fairgoers, 52% said yes, 28% said no, 19% had no opinion. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts would be the 19% that have no opinion probably don't know or don't understand. The people in Hennepin County, you should be really paying attention to this, because this is an unelected board that has tax authority. Very, very unusual. And they're not elected. The chairman of the Met Council and every single member is appointed by the governor of the state of Minnesota. And all of the money that they are spending is going on to the Hennepin County real estate tax rolls.
Okay, Senator Scott Newman, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.